Hello and welcome to another video. I'm trying something a little bit different this week. I wanted to try presenting a slideshow here. So this week I wanted to talk about what Seinfeld can teach us about writing. I have been watching a lot of Seinfeld recently, and I've noticed some really interesting things about how it works and how it constructs its comedy. So particularly if you want to write comedy, this is really important, but actually it works for a lot of different types of stories. So first of all, what does nothing really... I mean, it's the show about nothing. What does nothing really mean? Well, Seinfeld is really about the way that we face the minutiae of everyday life. It's about four friends navigating and obsessing over these minutiae. And the show's own joke that it is about nothing is a perfect descriptor. The characters' actions are driven by petty concerns about things of little to no importance, really. And they never learn anything by the end of the show. It's just about life, as George says in The Pitch, Season 4 episode, The Pitch. But how does this drive the show's comedy at a deeper level? And I want to go through an episode or two just to really see that. So firstly, let's look at the cafe, which is episode 7 of season 3. Just quickly go through the synopsis. Jerry becomes fascinated with a failing local eclectic restaurant called the Dream Cafe and befriends its Pakistani owner Babu. He tries to convince Babu to change the decor and menu into a Pakistani restaurant to make it more successful. The restaurant does no better, and Babu angrily blames Jerry for this failure. Meanwhile, George's girlfriend Monica asks him to take an IQ test. George, worried about being embarrassed by the score, asks Elaine to secretly take it for him. The plan backfires after Jerry convinces Elaine to take the test at the Dream Cafe, where she is distracted by Jerry, Kramer, and Babu. Due to these distractions, she ends up with a low score of 85. She asks George if she can retake the test. George begrudgingly agrees to allow Elaine to take the test again, and she does so at Jerry's apartment. Just as she's about to leave, Kramer locks himself in after being chased by his mother's ex-boyfriend for stealing his jacket, and Elaine is trapped. By the time Elaine escapes, the test time is up, and her and George's little plan has been discovered. At the very end of the episode, the group notice that the Dream Cafe has been forced to close, and they wonder where to go for dinner. They each argue in favour of a different type of cuisine. Jerry asks, "You know it would be great?" almost sarcastically, implying that it would be great to have an eclectic restaurant nearby, and the others give him a look of disdain. Now you'll notice that I've bolded certain elements of this. And this is just to highlight something, really the thing I'm going to be talking about for the most part here in this video, which is the individual storylines of all the characters influence each other. If Jerry had not become fascinated by the Dream Cafe, then he would not have suggested to Elaine that she do the IQ test there, and she would not have gotten distracted by Jerry, Kramer, and Babu. She would not have then had to take the test again, not been in Jerry's apartment. Kramer would not have, and she wouldn't have been affected by Kramer locking himself in. George and Elaine's little thing would never have been discovered. Kramer, of course, his felt relatively small little storyline affects Elaine and George because he traps Elaine in her apartment, in Jerry's apartment, and that screws up their whole plan. And Jerry's little storyline comes back in the end because the Dream Cafe closes and they're stuck for where to go for dinner, when with the Dream Cafe there they would have had a perfect place. So, and I mean, this is perfect for a show that is basically about these characters, the minutiae of these characters' lives, and they're all not very nice people, so it's to an extent about karma. And they get what's coming to them in the end, though they never learn anything. That's important. So let's keep going. Also, the dialogue. The dialogue, there's plenty of great dialogue in Seinfeld, but it's important. I just wanted to highlight the first scene of the cafe because it shows something that's very interesting. Dual track dialogue. George and Jerry are having a conversation, except that really they're just talking to themselves about two separate things and not really listening to the other. George is obsessing over the fact that his girlfriend Monica thinks he's a nice guy, but women don't like nice, he says. Jerry, meanwhile, is obsessing over the restaurant. And George isn't really listening, and he keeps going on about why is nice bad. They come together for a little bit, Jerry asking about George's cologne, what's that smell? He says it's a little cologne. And then Jerry, because he's Jerry, makes fun of him and says, why didn't he refuse to wear it? And George comes back with, I'm too nice. And it comes back to George's obsession over him being too nice. So we get a punchline. And we get this tension, this comedic tension, just enough to make us laugh from the fact that these characters aren't really listening to each other. And of course the tension also of their own neuroses. And this is something that is important in dialogue. Each character is talking for a reason, and that reason is expressing something deeper about them, and it often creates conflict. In drama, the conflict might be heightened or might be very, very intense over something very high stakes. Here it's about something very small stakes. And not only is that comedic, but it also expresses something about George and about Jerry. And the fact that they're not really listening to each other shows their self-involvement. This is great dialogue. Another good thing about this is the fact that if I took away the little dialogue indicators indicating that it was George and Jerry speaking, if you had seen Seinfeld before, then you could probably tell which character was which, even without those tags. George in particular has a very distinct way of speaking. And this is another important thing. Your characters need to have a distinct way of speaking. If they don't, they all blend together and it can become a bit confusing and like they don't have personalities of their own. So let's move on, because this scene also shows something else that I want to talk about. Nothing is wasted in Seinfeld's scenes. In a later episode in Season 3, The Red Dot, Hennigan's scotch is brought up in two practically unrelated scenes. This is the first one.
Yeah, so?
I'm just going to skip
Smell me without the drink.
to the point.
I suspect that this guy I'm seeing might be drinking, but I can't smell it. Come on.
Okay, well, what am I drinking? What do you got? I got a bottle of scotch my uncle gave me. Hennigan's.
So that's the first mention of Hennigan's. Not really funny yet. There's more funny in that scene. But I'm just rushing through this now because I've got a bit to get through. I just want to highlight that.
Hennigan's? I was sitting there in the office.
So that's a bit too far.
How did you do that? You had sex with the
Here we
cleaning
go.
woman on your desk? Who are you? How did you do that? Hennigan's. Hennigan's?
And it's mentioned again. And the audience laughs partly because of we've already seen that scene with Kramer. It's a callback. And they also laugh because it's funny in other ways, particularly when you know what's happened and when the scene continues and we hear a bit more about him having sex with the cleaning lady. But what I really wanted to highlight here was the fact that these two scenes are unrelated. But this small thing, the scotch, is what connects them. All these stories interconnect in the smallest of ways, right down to the brand of scotch. While most sitcoms would have an A and a B plot, Seinfeld had, albeit smaller, C and D plots, and these all affected each other throughout an episode, converging at the end. And this is a really important part of good storytelling. Screenwriting coach John Truby writes in his book, The Anatomy of Story, that in order to create great characters, we should think of all our characters as part of a web in which each helps define the others. And Seinfeld does this perfectly. Many sitcoms had the characters facing their problem of the week independent of the other characters. They might talk about their problem with the other characters, but often they would deal with it on their own. Seinfeld had each story connect and influence all the others, usually with disastrous but humorous results. So this is basically what I wanted to talk about. Make sure that your characters are connected to each other and that they're all influencing each other, because this is how life works. We don't... that's how great storytelling works, at the very least. We don't do things independently. We're a social species, and so therefore we need to have interaction, and having the right sort of characters helps bring into sharp relief our main characters' neuroses, and brings out and further develops the side characters into unique entities in and of themselves. A character, as Truby says, characters are often defined by what they are not. And also, make sure when you're writing comedy that everything is relevant. If you're going to make a joke out of every little element, use callbacks, stuff like that. Make sure that your dialogue is revealing something about character. Make sure that your comedy is character-driven rather than trying to force jokes into the show. I'm finding it hard to do Seinfeld justice here. So really, what you should just do is go and watch the show and analyze it, figure out how it works. But I hope you've enjoyed this video nevertheless, and that it gives you a greater appreciation of the show. Thanks for watching. As always, please subscribe and like. Please share this video if you think someone might benefit from it, or just if you liked it. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter. The links are down there in the description. Join my Facebook writers group, the Writers Network, and visit my website, ishanmorrisgray.wordpress.com. All of those links are in the description down below as well. I'm also going to link a little video from Nerdwriter, which you might have seen before, about Seinfeld and what nothing really means. It goes into what I've talked about here a little bit. And Nerdwriter is great if you haven't seen any of his videos, so you should check him out. Thanks for watching again. I will see you next week for another video. Thanks.